Steve Baker, who we are, I don't say this, happily, Steve. I don't mean to make this sound like it's something we're all excited about, but somebody that I expected to be in jail already, and we're expecting that you may not last the month before you're arrested by the FBI. Any updates on that?
The only update we have was given to my attorney between the week of Christmas and January 1st, and that was a conversation he had with the new U.S. attorney that has my case. And that new U.S. attorney told him that now they have moved my self-surrender date back to mid-January, and that they would give me 7 to 10 days notice, because they have, I will tell you, for 2 years, they've respected my travel schedule and have at least shown that kind of courtesy. But it's the middle of the month now, and we still haven't heard back from them yet. Now, they did tell my attorney at the time when he asked, well, can you just let us know what the charges are going to be? And the AUSA said, no, we're not going to tell you. Well, why is that? And I kid you not, Glenn, the U.S. attorney told my attorney that they won't tell me what my charges are or what I'm facing, because they said I will tweet it out immediately.
Well, yeah, so what's the problem with that?
I'm not exactly sure.
Yeah. Okay, so Steve, we have a lot of new people listening today. They saw what happened in Iowa last night. They want analysis on it. We're going to get that to you here in a second. But for people who haven't been following why they're after you, it has to have something to do with the fact that you were in the building as a journalist, just like the ABC and NBC people, and you took video, and you started to say, this isn't the story that everybody is saying it is. Then about 2 months ago, you put together a video for The Blaze that showed Nancy Pelosi's security detail, who is instrumental in the convictions of a lot of these people. Bring me up to speed. We'll play the first part of the clip. Tell me what we're going to hear in this clip.
It's very important for people to focus in on one thing here. Special Agent David Lazarus, who was on the Dignitary Protection Detail for Nancy Pelosi, he testified in the Oath Keepers trial that he witnessed the interaction between the Oath Keepers and Harry Dunn, Officer Harry Dunn, who's now running for Congress, by the way. Yes. And that he saw this interaction, this highly antagonistic interaction between the Oath Keepers and Harry Dunn 3 or 4 times is what he testified in great detail in that trial. The problem with that, Glenn, is that Special Agent Lazarus was not even in the same building. And we secured the Capitol CCTV video that I don't think they ever thought we would get access to, showing that that's the truth.
So let me play the first part of what just broke yesterday. It's from Blaze TV, and it is an investigative report, again, by Steve Baker. Here's the setup of what Steve said prior to, so you'll understand the importance of this videotape in cut 2. Listen.
The story of David Lazarus on January 6th is very simple.
Lawyers for Stuart Rhodes and 4 other members of the Oath Keepers on trial have suggested that the group helped Officer Harry Dunn. Dunn just took the stand and said flat out, quote, they didn't.
Sentenced to 4 years in prison.
Sentenced to 8.5 years in prison.
Sentenced to 12 years in prison. Sentenced to 18 years in prison.
His story that day is he was assisting the evacuation of the Senate at the time that the incident between Officer Harry Dunn and the Oath Keepers began.
Just outside of the rotunda, there was Harry Dunn. He's a Capitol Police officer. He was freaking out. I mean, he was screaming. No! Get the out of here! He had a rifle. He might get taken out, but he was going to take a bunch of people with him. He was definitely in a position where he could have done some damage.
The Oath Keepers lined up between him and the more agitated protesters and assisted him in keeping them off of him.
Dunn rejected the defense's argument that members of the militia protected him.
I don't conflate my story.
He had 2 separate FBI interviews which were in conflict with one another. In the first FBI interview, he actually gave a favorable story about his encounter with the 4 Oath Keepers.
And he stood in front of Harry Dunn for almost 6 minutes.
After he was brought in for his second FBI interview, he changed that story.
He was fighting back insurrectionists across the Capitol while being called the vilest racist names.
So what they did is they brought in another officer, Special Agent David Lazarus, to kind of bolster that story and give it more credibility by saying that when he arrived at the top of those stairs, that he saw Dunn standing at the top of the stairs being hassled by these Oath Keepers. At the time the Harry Dunn Oath Keepers encounter began, he was not in the same building.
Wow. Now, what this video, if you're not a Blaze TV subscriber, what you're seeing on the screen are the timestamps. There's about 8 different cuts there of where everybody is in the Capitol. You see it on a map through graphics, but you also then see the Capitol cameras. What's so frightening about this, Steve, is they didn't think that anybody would get this footage. And the lie is so clear that it is a lie. And basically to put all of these people in jail based on that lie, it is terrifying what our government's willing to do to its own people.
It's terrifying that they are still trying to cover this up. As a matter of fact, we learned just a few days ago that Capitol Police Chief Thomas Manger has stated that he has no intention to investigate this internally or to investigate the actions or the testimony of Special Agent Lazarus. That's correct. And what's also amazing, and we show this in this particular video, we show a screenshot of an internal Capitol Police leadership email that I received from one of my sources inside the building, who sent this to me when back in the original release that we did when we started talking about this without the videos back in October, that they were very pleased that this story was not getting traction at the time. But now that we have the videos, this thing really blew up on the social media sites yesterday. Okay,
so tell me what we're going to see and hear now. Part 2.
This basically is going to take us through the part where we see Lazarus now emerging to the area where he claimed that he was, but this is long after the Oath Keepers have left the building. They've certainly left the area and are exiting the building. But this, once again, it solidifies the fact that, and it really brings home the fact, Glenn, that these individuals were testified against improperly. They were lied against. They're certainly, at the very least, their not only their convictions, but their sentencings were much worse as a result of these testimonies between Harry Dunn and Lazarus. And the fact is that neither one of these cops who testified in this trial could possibly have experience what they said. As I said before, they gave very, very specific and detailed testimonies, and both of them are not only in conflict with one another, they're in complete conflict with the truth.
Okay, here's part 2. This was released yesterday. Listen to this.
Lazarus was just not there. He could not have seen, he could not have witnessed what was taking place because Lazarus was in another Senate office building across the street from Constitution Avenue. So we were able to track Lazarus on the Capitol CCTV cameras. Lazarus can be seen moving away from the Capitol building through a lower tunnel at 2:37:59 p.m. Lazarus continues moving toward the Senate office buildings at 2:41:49 p.m. During Officer Lazarus's October 31st trial testimony, he stated that he began his return to the Capitol building after hearing shots fired over Capitol Police radio. That occurred at 2:43 p.m. 14:43 hours. Here, Lazarus can be seen moving back toward the Capitol at 2:45 p.m. Dunn's encounter with the Oath Keepers began at 2:44 and lasted roughly between 5 and 6 minutes. Here, Lazarus finally emerges from the tunnel back to the Senate side of the Capitol building at 2:48. Dunn falsely testified that Lazarus was already at the location where he encountered the Oath Keepers before he arrived. but Lazarus can be seen at the top of the elevator leading up from the tunnel at 2:48 p.m. on the Senate side of the Capitol, over 4 minutes after Dunn encountered the Oath Keepers on the House side.
How is this not being investigated? I guess this is where you come in. If it wasn't for people like you, we wouldn't know. If it wasn't for places like the Blaze, this story wouldn't be told and it would just go away. But in a surveillance state, and that's really what the Capitol grounds are, it's a surveillance state. You can track every movement of everybody and tie them all together. It takes a lot of time, as you know. But in a normal circumstance, this would mean that those people who were tried and convicted with this testimony, they would either go for a mistrial or they would be immediately released. That's the way America has always worked. And no one is doing anything about it. They think they're going to get away with it. Is that just because people aren't aware of it?
Well, they're not aware of it, but I will tell you that we are working very, very closely with congressional members and staffers on this particular story, as well as the other stories that we've currently got in development. As a matter of fact, Representative Barry Loudermilk, who is the chairman of the subcommittee of oversight from House Admin, they just announced a couple of days ago that they have been given 3 times the number of staffers from House Speaker Johnson for the specific purpose of investigating January 6 matters, and I can confirm that now. But I have sat with Mr. Loudermilk several times. I've met with his chief of staff and his staff members on many occasions now, and I think that at the very least, before a committee is called or another J6 select committee is convened, they are going to bring these officers in for transcripted interviews under oath.
Thank you very much, Steve. I really appreciate all of your work, and we pray for you. And I ask America, pray for Steve Baker. He is under threat from the U.S. government just because he's telling the truth. How do I know it's the truth? He has the video evidence. Steve, thank you so much. Blaze Media correspondent and investigative journalist. And if you don't have this video yet, you can find it online. You can go to theblaze.com. You can also find it on Blaze TV, but tweet this out and spread this as much as possible. This tells a completely different story, and there is nothing but facts. You cannot argue this at all because everything is time-stamped.